Welcome to The Bad, the Ugly, the Good, and Healing You. I am your host, Dr. Jenita Griffin, also known as Doc G. You guys, I am so thankful to be here. I am so glad to be alive and living in this experience we call life. I am so grateful to be able to share and talk with you in this space. I am so grateful to be able to share with you my thoughts and my opinions in terms of my expertise, in terms of my career path and walk of life, as well as some personal experiences. I am so thankful for all of you who have been sharing, and subscribing to my channel and just sharing the word. Um, like I said again, I hope to get better and better as time goes on. Okay. So today's topic, you guys, we have a topic. Um, and it's a topic that we all kind of sharing. It's a topic that many of us are faced with in this world today. Okay. Um, so last week, I was kind of a little bit, my mood was a little down. I was a little bit unhinged in that I discussed the chaos in the world and what I feel and I believe to be that we are in a spiritual battle. Um, it's not anything regarding black versus white. It's not anything regarding, it's about truth. It's about us living. It's about humanity in general. And we have to come together as a people and we have to look at how we can go about changing some of the things that is happening. Again, I mentioned that I was afraid um, about what's going on in the world. And I feel like we have to try something different. I feel like in the past, we had movements that were of hate, and I don't feel like they worked. And for the opposite, we had movements of love, and I don't think that worked as well. Although they may have um, created a process where we have better today and we're doing better today, I feel like we need to try something different. This is something different, you guys. And again, I talked about how it is a spiritual battle. So we need to come together and we need to look at healing humanity and not just the division with everyone. But anyway, I'm not going to go into that anymore. I want to talk today. I'm going to switch topics and talk about something that we're all going through. It's something that many of us kind of live with quietly, and that is grief. Yeah, I know. So the topic of grief is so heavy that I feel like it is so sacred, and I don't necessarily want to rush through it. I know I can be long winded at times. I know that there are times where, um, like the last, I want to say 2 episodes have been like 60 minutes, and I know that is not good. My feedback is in that I should lower it down to 40, 45 minutes max. So I am trying, I am working. Perhaps if I am able to finally get it together with live and everything, it would shorten it or not, but we'll see. But this is going to be a two-part episode, okay? Now, grief is not only about death, it can also be about the loss of health, about the loss of a dream, about the loss of relationship, um, about losing what we used to be. These are things that are considered loss, and it may not be as final as death, but these are loss, and it could shake a person to their core and cause us to, experience a lot of hurt. It can cause us to experience a lot of pain and even trauma. And if it goes unaddressed, it can manifest into different things where it becomes clinical and mental. Okay, so grief is love that goes nowhere. And I want you to know there is nothing wrong with you for still hurting. Grief doesn't run on a calendar, it doesn't respect timetables. And for most people who experience grief by the death of a loved one, I often say time, you know how they say time heals all wounds? I say different. I feel like in my experiences with death, I lost my mom in 2007. And with my experience about death, time doesn't heal all wounds. It just makes it easier to carry. It makes it easier to accept, and it makes it easier to carry, and it makes it easier to live and go about life as time goes on. Let's put it that way. I feel like to this day, I still have moments where I am kind of taken back and wishing, dreaming, wondering. And it almost feels like a lifetime ago um, when she was here. And I, again, it's just easier to accept. Time makes it easier to kind of carry. Okay. Um, for me, I feel like, it shows up in a lot of places for me, and many people, it shows up in their memories, their anniversaries, through songs, through smells, um, and moments where life keeps moving, but your heart hasn't caught up with it. There is something about death that shakes us up even when we know it's coming. Um, it's that part where the bad about it is that we're actually going through and we kind of know it's coming, but we know it's a part of life. We know that everyone experiences um, grief. We know everyone owes a death. I say everyone owes a death, and everyone um, experience grief. They have lost someone. I feel like we have all of that in common. It's universal, not a black thing, not a white thing. It's universal, and all earthly beings must go through it. So, even though we know this is still hard to experience, we know that grief is a part of life, death is a part of life, I should say. Um, Knowing it doesn't make it easier. It's one of those things that it's coming. When you have a sick loved one, you start grieving before the loss even happens. Um, and this is called anticipatory grief, when you are grieving a loved one um, before it even happens because you know they are dying. It can often feel like dread, it can often feel like heartbreak at the same time. You feel guilty for thinking ahead. You wonder why. You wonder why you are grieving and they're still alive. You try to stay strong while falling apart at the same time. It's sort of like living in two worlds. You're hoping that they are healed or they will be healing, but you're also preparing for their death and saying goodbye. This is anticipatory grief, and this is grief that can be very confusing and cause people to experience a lot of guilt and pain as they prepare to say goodbye to their loved one. With the emotional exhaustion from constantly being on alert for wondering, hey, is this the day? Is this the day? Is this the day? People grieve their loved one who they know that they are sick before they go. Oftentimes getting angry. They feel that life is forcing them for their loved one to suffer, which is difficult, to watch your loved one suffer. You may have a lot of questions about that. You may um, start to resent and question God. You feel like God is punishing you. That's hard. That's a hard thing to do. But the truth is, it's painful because you are grieving that person. You're grieving the normal life you had with that person in it, and it can be agonizing. It's hard to watch someone that you love decline, but it's another thing to lose someone tragically, unexpected, or suddenly. That can be tragic within itself. The fact that it was sudden, that's one trauma on top of another trauma. Um, I feel like when death catches you when death catches you off guard, and it's something that happened where it's suddenly and it's violently, that's a whole different layer of trauma. You don't even have time to prepare for it. So another bad part of grief is that many get caught in a cycle of regrets because you didn't have that time to prepare when you lose that one who you lost suddenly. You weren't able to gather your thoughts. You didn't get to say to them what you needed to say, and oftentimes you're not able to have that closure with them that you would have loved to have. There was no warning. And your mind starts to race when you have situations like that. I mean, I don't know how many times um, I replay, and I still have to this day, my mom's message that she left before she passed away the next day. And she asked me to go to church with her that night. And I told her I was, tired. I wasn't feeling well. Um, and I didn't go. And then the next morning, it wasn't the next morning, more like the afternoon, she was gone. So that was hard for me to question myself and wonder if I just had went to spend those last moments with her um, that night, if I just went to church with her. So there was no warning when I lost my mom, and when you have those experiences, your mind starts to reach your mind starts to try to control things. And this is where you start thinking about the what ifs. And that's where I was thinking about the what ifs. What if I had went? What if I had went out shopping with her? What if I said I loved you more? So again, sudden death doesn't just break your heart. It starts to mess with your mind. Your mind starts searching for the moment you could have changed the outcome. And oftentimes this grief feels like shock. You go through the motions and you're like, this is not real. This is in disbelief. You're in disbelief. You're saying things like, oh no, I just talked to them. You panic. You may feel numb at the same time. You feel like time has stopped for you, but it really didn't. It kept moving. You have these intrusive images, or you replay over and over in your mind again, like I did. And then you go to the point of getting angry. You get angry at life, you get angry at the world, and you get angry at God. You get angry at how it happened, the way it happened. You get caught in this cycle, um, and you replay, if I would have known, I would have done this. And truth be told, you guys, that's one of the worst things to um, wish you have done something differently and replay that in your mind over and over and over again. This is one of the hardest part because you don't just grieve the person that you lost. You grieve the unfinished conversations. You grieve the plan that you never had with them. You grieve the future that you know that they will not be in it. You grieve to the fact that you couldn't say goodbye and you didn't have a chance to do that. So when it hurts your house, and it's one thing to have it where you lose someone outside of your household, outside of your immediate makeup family or your origin. It's one thing to have that, a distant loved one, but it's another thing to lose someone in your household so close to you. It feels unreal, and your life has changed forever, and it's a process. When it hits our heart, it feels impossible. So grief can come in waves. Some days are lighter, and some days knock you right off your feet, knocks the wind out of you. Some days, you understand that life continues, even though your world has paused. But at the same time, um, you become angry at other people because their life, kind of goes on, and they're moving on, and people return to normal. And sometimes that becomes very hard, very difficult for a person who is grieving. And sometimes with grief, it can feel like you are carrying a silent storm that's brewing inside of you. It can look like a sadness that lingers. It can look like fatigue. It could look like loss of appetite. It could look like difficulty concentrating, um, crying unexpectedly, anger, numbness, and it can make you wonder, will I ever feel like myself again? It can make you question who you are. But there is also another part where people try to encourage you, and they may say things like, say, stay strong, or um, I want you to be happy. And I hate to say this one, but there are people who may say, aren't you over it yet? Though oftentimes when people try to encourage you, they mean well. Statements like this can minimize and reduce, so to speak, the depths of your pain in so many ways that it feels like what you lost. It feels like what you lost to other people didn't matter, and it matters to you. You lost someone, and it matters to you. And honoring that truth is not weakness in in the fact that you are acknowledging that you lost that person, and you're grieving through for this person, and you're going through this process. It's not weakness, it's love. It's love. So another bad part of grief is that it can change your world overnight, especially when it is a sudden death, a tragic death, where it came, so to speak, out of nowhere. It can change your world overnight. Um, One day you're living life, you're carrying on day to day, and the next day you're going through depression. Again, life becomes where it's split in two, before the loss and after the loss. It's almost like living two separate lives. And it's hard sometimes to um, remember, especially as time goes on, what your life was like when that person was in there. Um, you often go through a process that after the loss, you are expected that you will continue to function like the loss um, didn't affect you as much, as if you didn't lose a piece of yourself, and you really did. You really did. People don't, say um, that, hey, you're grieving, and I understand. Oftentimes, especially when you're grieving for long periods of times, some people, just as I said before, oftentimes that two people can face the same experience, and they, one can come out with one different perception and another one can come out with another perception. I lost um, I lost someone, and you lost that same person that was your person too. And you move on faster. You kind of go day to day, and you're okay. Whereas I may experience depression to a level that you don't understand, and you get judged by it. And many people look at it as a weakness. You are grieving. You are not weak. You are human. Most in part, oftentimes guilt. When you're grieving, you can also experience guilt. Um, it can oftentimes bring guilt that makes no sense. Guilt for something that you said, guilt for something that you didn't say, guilt for something that you did or didn't do, guilt because you survived that ordeal and they didn't, guilt because you're smiling and you smiled and you're laughing. It can bring guilt, and people feel guilty for healing. But healing is not betrayal. Some grief experiences even go to a level where I look at it as being invisible grief. And these are experiences like, say, for example, not necessarily a death, but you can grieve a divorce or a breakup. Some people grieve infertility or miscarriage, losing parents who are actually still here, but they diminish mentally, losing your friendships, a dream, your health. All of these things are loss. And it may, again, not be as final as death in someone transitioning, but it is a loss. And if you don't acknowledge it, it will eat away at your soul, if you will. The other thing, I feel like with the invisible grief, people don't validate it. People don't acknowledge. They look at it as something that happens, and that's a part of life. That's a way of life. These things happen. It's ordeals, challenges that we must face and go through. And they don't validate it, and they look at it as you should be okay. You should be moving on. But truth be told, um, that is not always the truth. We are also, I do want to also touch on COVID. Now, I feel like through COVID, um, we live in a world now where it's a collective grief, if you will, call it that, collective grief. And this is where, we kind of all had lost massively at a period of time, and we all lived through it. We all lived through it. With COVID, which was the most recent, we all grieved. Many of us lost loved ones, many of us lost, not even just with death, deaths through transitions. You lost your livelihood, you lost your stability, you lost your identity, your confidence, your peace, your joy, your faith, even. You lost so many of these things during COVID. I feel like COVID, I could talk about in its own episode within itself regarding what people lost. And I say that to say it seems like every household was affected by COVID, in a sense, whether it was death through someone transitioning or whether it was loss of confidence, loss of social skills, if you will, loss of a job. We, our kids, we are still paying for that to this day, um, the effects of COVID in our households. I don't know how many young people were affected by having that significant pause in school today, socially. Used to be a social butterfly, interact with other people. Um, my daughter in elementary school, she was in elementary school when COVID started. And then when COVID ended and they were going back to school, she was in her first year of high school. That affected her so deeply. And as a result, that was that ripple effect where it affected everyone in the household. COVID affect people to this day. And it's something that we haven't really addressed in detail in terms of the impact of the family household and the residuals of COVID, if you will, to this day. Okay, so globally, so to put it in perspective, globally, there have been 7 million reported COVID deaths worldwide. And in the US, over 1.2 million reported deaths. And there is also what they call COVID related deaths, where these are linked to they are linked indirectly to the pandemic. And they were things like where a person have delayed medical care, overwhelmed healthcare systems, and mental health conditions as a result of COVID-19. And as a result, there were deaths when these systems kind of failed. And I feel like this matters because we talk about grief today and we're not talking about an individual's pain. We're talking about the emotional reality of living through an era of loss and uncertainty, if you will. And that has been what COVID um, made us aware of and brought to our awareness. Now, let's move into the ugly, if it is really such a thing, and that all of it to me is ugly, grief. And all of what we talked about, it's to me, it can all be ugly. But if I had to say a negative piece of it, I would say the ugly part is that we kind of try to hide it, minimize it, and we kind of try to suppress our emotions and what we feel when we are going through grief. Um, and oftentimes that is because we are taught that we need to be strong. Um, we need to keep going. We're taught that God makes no mistakes, or in our households, a lot of times, don't cry. You know, you just got to move on. Or here's the one: they're in a better place. And I know people mean well again, but those are statements that causes people to shut down. This is the side of grief most people hide, and they feel empty. You know, they are angry with God, even though that this is something that we all kind of go through in terms of that process. And as I talked about, the guilt from experiencing the guilt from experiencing joy emotions like laughing or smiling, even though you're grieving, that is something also that causes um, people to feel guilt, and it just all makes grief complicated. You know, grief changes you. Grief changes you. But in me looking at the silver lining in a lot of things, it changes you, but it also helps you to um, experience life in a sense of going through it with wisdom and gaining wisdom, and it deepening your compassion. And it teaches you to show up for other people. It teaches you how to um, treasure what matters. So when people are grieving, and when they feel, you know, somewhat guilty for laughing or smiling, and saying to themselves that just because they're doing that, then they are not missing that person. I say you are. So still, you know, it still hurts. You miss them even years later. Again, I still have moments where I cry out to my mom, and she's been gone since 2007. It is okay. Your grief is just a testament of how you love deeply. That's it. So I do want to get into the stages of grief. I know I went over them briefly before, but I kind of want to get into them a little more detail. And the stages of grief are by was developed by Elizabeth Kubler Ross, and I want you to understand that the stages of grief, you know, you don't go through them in a state. You don't go through them in order. You don't go through them with instruction. They're not linear. You don't go from stage one to stage two. It just doesn't work that way. Going through the stages can be a cycle. It can be a cycle. So the first one is shock. You know, with shock, when I think of shock, you know, when a person passes away, you become surprised this has happened. First of all, you may experience some type of numbness. You may feel like this isn't real, and you try to convince yourself that it isn't real. Denial is stage two, where you may refuse to acknowledge the reality of that person's death. And you may say things like, I'm expecting them to walk right in that door right now, or this is not really happening. This is all lies. This is a trick, you know. Tupac is still alive, so to speak. Denial. Then you move through, well, the stage three is anger. when it becomes clear to you that the person has transitioned and they are not coming back, you become angry. You become angry. You say things like, this is not fair. Why would God allow this? Why would God put me through this? You become mad at everybody, including yourself. You're angry. You're angry at the world. Stage four, bargaining. You try to negotiate or you try to bargain your way out of that situation. You begin to check things and say things like, God, if you fix this, then, or I'll do this if you can bring them back. You try to bargain the person's death. You try to bargain. And again, you try to bargain with God. If I could just have one last chance. Stage five is depression. Um, Depression occurs in the grief process as it kind of sinks in and a person's mood changes. You get into a space where you start to say things to yourself like, I don't care, or you push everyone away. I don't want to talk. You lose energy, you become fatigued. Everything feels heavy. Everything feels like a cloud is hanging over you. You're sad. And you're sad in such a way that it's hard for you to see your way out of it. Stage six, acceptance and hope. Um, you expect that your loved one has transitioned. You accept that. And you stop trying to rationalize and protest that particular loss. You stop it. You come to terms with it, with the things that you come to terms with it, and you start saying things like, "It hurts, but I'm learning how to live without them." You start accepting it. You can be in acceptance. It's important to understand. You can be in acceptance and still cry. You can accept it and still feel angry. You can accept it and still, miss that person every day and long for that person. Acceptance is not happiness, it's reality. It's reality. So, again, it hurts, but you're learning to live again. There has been a stage seven that was kind of added on um, later in the years, and it's processing grief. And this is where you start to express your grief through creative expressions in your words or creative outlets. You start honoring the person. In other words, this is where that happens. So, going through that process, it doesn't necessarily mean that you won't miss the person and that you are um, betraying the person if you go to acceptance and you start processing your grief healthy. It doesn't mean that you don't miss the person or anything. It just means that you are honoring yourself and you're honoring them. Okay. So, another part of grief, I kind of want to go back where within the depression part, that grief can cause you to be withdrawn and isolate yourself, so much so that you push everybody away, and most people may not understand it. When you're going through a process of grief, and it can be longer than most people go through, you stop going out, you stop wanting to talk, you stop answering people's calls. Sometimes people don't mean to abandon you, they just don't know what to say to you, they just don't know what to do. But while you grieve, you do need connection. So don't withdraw from people that you love. Um, I just wanted to kind of, go back to that and mention that, because that does happen a lot where a lot of people isolate themselves. And when you're isolating yourself for one reason or another, because there are different reasons as why many people isolate going through grief, um, it makes things worse. Sure, you might not be around, want to be around people, but at the same time, connection is healing. Healing grows through self, and healing grows through safe connection. There is connection in healing. Okay, almost. And I'm already at 40. Oh no. Okay. I wanted to touch on the spiritual parts of grief. And I want to do that because that is something that I am in my most awareness of. And um, for other people who may want to understand the spiritual aspects of it. And yes, that can be an episode within itself. I want to talk about the afterlife, and there are many theories to that as well. But um, there is a spiritual piece to it, where um, people struggle with their spirituality, and they struggle with their thoughts about God and their faith when they are grieving. Most often, when a person is grieving, they become distant from God. They become confused. Wondering why God did this, angry. Numb. Feel like God abandoned you. You might find yourself praying and feeling nothing, feeling empty inside. You might worship or go to church and still feel empty, moving on day to day, but still feeling numb, still feeling empty. But I do want you to know that questioning does not mean that you don't believe. I feel like we all have moments in our grief where, we try to search for meaning in our loss. How could this be? Again, it's okay. And that could be a whole different episode that I could elaborate and talk with you about regarding spirituality and um, the afterlife and other stuff. Okay. Another ugly part is that grief turns into survival mode. Some people aren't just grieving, they are stuck in survival mode. They look fine, but they're emotionally shut down. They may be productive and still continue to work and do the things that they've always been doing, but they still feel dead inside. They may smile, but don't feel present in that moment. They're just getting day to day. They're just getting day to day in survival mode. But on the other hand, I see it that where, although this is something that where people just kind of keep going and going and going, this can also be dangerous, also because the most dangerous part in a person grieving is that they don't acknowledge it, and their grief goes unprocessed. This is where it starts to become clinical depression. Again, like I said, depression is one of the stages that most people who are grieving go through. But when it becomes, and I know they added, prolonged grief to the DSM-5, when it goes longer, and I don't even know what you can say considered to be normal. Again, how I grieve is different from how you grieve. My person may mean different to me as your person mean to you. But needless to say, years and years and years, it can turn into clinical depression, um, where it's an emotional and mental health thing now. You're experiencing panic attacks, anxiety. You start dibbling and dabbling in substances, becoming emotionally detached from other people, um, experiencing just significant chronic stress far beyond um, grief in that moment. And much in part, I feel like that is because you're carrying too much alone, and it's unprocessed. You're not talking about it. You're not connecting. You're not socializing and um, talking to people about what you're going through. No one was made to be here alone. Everybody needs somebody. I said it. Everybody needs somebody. Nobody got here alone. And your group, your circle is out there. You just have to search for it. If you feel uncomfortable in the group that you're in, then maybe that's not the group for you. You should feel comfortable. You should feel at peace, and you should be home, and you should feel that you're around like-minded people. So I know I said I needed to be at just about 40, but I know it's a little more. Um, so I've covered the bad and the ugly part of grief. And in this part of the episode, if this is something that stirred up something in you, that means you still feel, and that is a sign that you are still here. I want you to ask yourself, what loss am I still carrying? What emotions have I been avoiding? And most important, what would it look like to give myself compassion in this season? I want you to remember that. Ask yourself those questions. Grief is nothing that you just get over. It is something that you learn to live with, and it gets easier to carry throughout your walk of life. As long as you acknowledge it and do the work in healing. Again, this is a two-part episode. Next week in episode 6, we are going to be talking about the good. Although, again, I feel like death and loss can be considered ugly all the way. Oftentimes we know that people are here just for a season, and we all owe a death, and we all will someday be passing away and transitioning ourselves, and there will be other people behind grieving us, and that's where it's most difficult, those who are left behind. But next week we're going to be talking about the good. And that's more about how do you carry it? How do you move forward? How do you heal? How do you rebuild? Um, Looking at hope and meaning in things. Again, um, that can probably be a whole different episode with transitioning, afterlife, and everything. But I just want to keep things focused and not go off on a tangent again. Okay. So that is it for this episode of The Bad, the Ugly, the Good, and Healing You, where we were talking about grief and we're talking about the bad and the ugly in grief. Um, I also want to say that I am going to also in episode 6 talk about a little, not necessarily therapy approaches, but just one or two things that I might do with people. And I want you to understand and just remember, I am not your therapist. Okay. This is no way, shape, or form replacing therapy for you. So I don't want you to think that coming to this episode or what have you is um, replacing your therapy or your form of therapy. That is not how it's done. You want to do the work on healing you. This is just where I am essentially a guide throughout my years of expertise and my years of spiritual journey, where I am here to share with you today to, um, in hopes of, I should say, in hopes of helping you heal and we walk together in this space of life. Okay. So, once again, I am Dr. Jenita Griffin, Doc G. And as I say always, love you, be good to you, and expect great things for you. Until next time.
He placed this voice within me, and I'm answering his call.